All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on what part of the world you're visiting from right now. Uh, and where you're coming in from, be it LinkedIn, be it Twitter, or via the times.com website. I'm so excited to talk to you all today about how Auth0’s engineering team has tamed their incident response processes through no-code automation. I am your host, Pete Wren, along with my co-host, Dennis Henry from Auth0, engineering manager. And today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what Tines does and how it's benefiting teams all around the world. I'm going to talk a little bit about why an engineering team that has deep knowledge of coding would want to explore no-code automation. And then, most importantly, we're going to have Dennis give a demo of the processes and just talk you through some of the amazing work that Dennis has done. A couple quick housekeeping things before we get started. We will have a Q&A session at the end. So if you have questions, you can feel free to drop them in throughout the webinar and we will be addressing them towards the end. So for LinkedIn, there should be a comment section on the video as well as on times.com. There is a banner right under the video where you can go ahead and post your questions, and someone will be monitoring Twitter and will be posting anything from the comments under the video in that chat as well. So don't feel the need to wait until the end. Just feel free to post them as they come in and as you think of them. All right, so I'll start with a little bit of background about myself, and then we'll dive into Dennis's background. So again, I'm Pete Wren. I've been an account manager here at Tines for the last year, and my day-to-day is solely focused on the singular mission of helping my customers build automations that help reduce things like alert fatigue and reduce human error, remove the minutia like copy pasting across data sources, maybe manually opening tickets all the time, and ultimately automating complex processes like, for example, their phishing response, so that security teams can focus on the work that's most important to them and not deal with unnecessary burdens on a day-to-day basis. But before my role at Tines in the past, I was a software engineer at American Express for about 5.5 years. And actually, while I was working there, as you can imagine, at a large company like American Express, the application I was working on, involved pulling in data from literally hundreds of different data sets across the company on a weekly basis. And so the way I was able to solve that problem in the past was just writing dozens and dozens of, little C# scripts, just doing basic ETL process automation, grabbing data from the sources, doing any sort of data transformation that was needed, and ultimately running it through our data processing layer. And I'll talk a little bit more about where I wish I would have had Tines in a little bit here. So now I'll open it up. Dennis, could you just tell the world about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Dennis Henry. I use he/him pronouns. I'm a senior engineering manager here at Auth0, which is a product unit within Okta. I've been at Auth0 since November of 2020. And I've facilitated various teams here, starting with a storage team back when I first started, then working on some new platform development for a bit, and then I shifted back to the operations subdomain within platform, and now I lead up the subdomain where we do everything operations for Auth0. Before that, I came from data center industry. I was the chief operating officer at a company called Auth0’s. It's a global data center management company. I actually worked there for 13 years, moved up the ranks from just an entry-level support person to various levels within support, DBA, sysadmin, then leading the support department, leading operations, and eventually into chief operating officer role. I tell everyone I'm first and foremost an engineer. Always have been, always will be. I can't stop coding. I love to write code. I love to build things, and I'm really inspired by that work. But as my career's kind of shifted, I found that my superpower, as it were, is actually facilitating other people doing their best work. So it's where I've really shifted my focus, but still held on to this concept of how can I make things better? How can I improve the processes? How can I overall improve what's happening? So when I came to Auth0, I noticed that I could do a lot more. And I've been really just pushing myself constantly to find places where I can improve things.
Thanks for that intro, Dennis. Really appreciate that. How did you get introduced to Tines?
Yeah, so it's funny because I was actually pulled into one of our company's security incidents, and I had never been in one before, and I had been in engineering incidents, but I see this tooling that they're using, and I'm like, what is that? Like, so much nicer, so much cleaner than what we were doing on the engineering side. And frankly, I was jealous. Was my first reaction, and then second reaction was messaging the head of our detection and response team and saying, how do I get that? Like, show me it. Like, can I have a demo? So that was how I kind of first got introduced to it, and it was kind of a gateway drug because I've been addicted ever since.
And what were you doing before you moved your incident response onto Tines?
Sure, it was a very much like probably most companies. It was I think it was Node.js built solution that was just integrating with the Slack API as well as other APIs, and it worked really well. The company used it for many years. It was just something that I felt like was very hard to change. If I wanted to add something in, frankly, my Node.js is pretty atrocious. So I was struggling to make any changes, and also the tool had no real like owner. So I just thought it could. I thought it could be better. I thought we could do something more elegant and easier to maintain.
So it sounds like the bulk of that was written by somebody else, maybe who had been long gone from Auth0 at the time.
No, he was still there. He had just moved on to, or he's still here actually. He had just moved on to other roles. So the team that I worked with was the custodian of the tooling, but had very little actual changes being made to it, just due to the fact that it was kind of a bear to make changes and hopefully not break things. With all software engineering, making changes without breaking things can be difficult.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so we'll go ahead and pivot here a little bit. I just want to talk a little bit about what Tines is for the broader audience real quick. So first and foremost, we are no-code automation built by security practitioners for security teams. Today, we are supporting mission-critical workflows for companies all across the world. And amazingly, you can build some really amazing complex automations with just our 7 core action types that are available to you on the platforms, things that handle like control flow, if then processing, basic data transformations, HTTP requests, etc. And really the most amazing thing and what drew me to this company in the first place was that Tines is completely tool agnostic. So as long as the tech stack you're working with has decent APIs to connect to, then we can support your workflows. Our bread and butter is, taking data from point A, doing anything in the middle, and getting it across to point B so that you can continue on and automate your processes. We can also handle, though, plenty of use cases outside of security because, like I just mentioned, since we're so flexible and tool agnostic. So some examples of that, we actually host every once in a while a You Did What with Tines competition, where the entire purpose is to come up with a workflow. Could be work related, could be non-work related, but just figuring out new and innovative ways to use Tines outside of your regular day-to-day security practices. So a couple examples I want to highlight. Actually, one of our customer success engineers here at Tines built an amazing story that runs a Slack bot out of Tines where you can actually play a Pokemon emulator and it'll actually show you the results in Twitch. So in the Slack channel, you can send like up, down, left, right, A, B. And then when you watch on the Twitch stream, it'll, grab those different inputs and make the appropriate action in real time. But we also have some really creative, still work-related use cases. They're just a little outside of security. So the winner of our winter You Did What with Tines competition was a really amazing and simple Tines story called Handagachi. Somebody had wrote a Slack bot that would gamify their global team handovers, which for them is particularly important because they're a globally distributed team like many other teams around the world today. And, it was a Slack bot, very similar interface to Tamagotchis, if we remember that from back in the day. So if you would, feed him Handagachi by completing handovers through the Slack bot, it would keep it happy. It would respond with happiness. You could also, continue to contribute to the handover and just ultimately, grow it. If you wouldn't update it, then Handagachi would, start with a general reminder at first, like, hey, I'm hungry. But over time, it would get madder and madder at you and have harsher responses. And it could even take revenge if you neglected it too long. And I know that Dennis has actually built a really fun kind of non-work related use case in Tines. Dennis, do you want to tell everybody about your acronym bot?
Yeah, I just want to say that I think the secret weapon of Tines is that it can literally do anything you want it to do. And that's been my favorite thing. Like I do nothing with security. I don't really work in that realm, but Tines can do anything. So I've had issues kind of jumping into this SaaS industry with acronyms. People use them like mad, and I have no idea what 99% of them mean. So I decided to build in a very simple Tines story. It literally is, I think, 10 actions or less that allows you to search for an acronym, and it tells you if it's in the data store. It uses DynamoDB. If it's not, you can define it. If it is, it tells you what it is, and it offers the ability to correct it. And it does it privately, which is one of the best things. So like if someone says something in any DM, in any thread, in any message, you can just be, what is RFO? And it will tell you. It'll just pop it in and let you know. So that way you don't have to be out of touch with what's going on. It's incredibly simple, but incredibly powerful. It's actually one of the most used slash commands on on our Slack installation now, just due to the fact that a lot of people just have the same problem I do, where there's too many acronyms coming up too quickly, and nobody knows what they mean.
And where did you pull in all of those acronyms from?
Yeah, so there had to be at least 10 or so different Confluence pages with tables full of acronyms. And they had like tons of duplicates, tons of different things. Every team maintained their own. So I just went and scrubbed each one, pulled down them into a CSV, and then piped them into DynamoDB. So now there's just one source of truth with over 500, probably coming up on 600 acronyms now stored in this DynamoDB. It's incredibly simple, but again, just crazy powerful, just to enable people to not have to be constantly searching Confluence and finding 18 different results for one acronym, none of them being the one they were looking for.
Exactly. And I'm guessing this is constantly updating, right? Like maybe once a week it goes back and pans through all those 10 Confluence pages to find any updates and writes them to Dynamo.
Yeah, I can easily do that. Right now, I'm trying to get people to break down those Confluence pages and only say like this is the source of truth, so to say, of acronyms. So we're trying to get rid of all the Confluence tables, but it's so easy to use the Confluence API to pull from a page if I wanted it to. It's just not something that I really want people to be using Confluence anymore.
Sure. So how do you think you would ultimately crowdsource new entries to DynamoDB down the line?
So you can do it right into the Slack story. So you just do what is, and you give it an acronym. If you don't know the answer, you can define it.
Oh,
One of the ideas I had was basically if you don't know the answer, you could press like, I don't know what this is, and pipe it into a channel. And that channel be just full of people who work at the company can help you define it. And whatever answer they give, it stores it into Dynamo. Again, the world is really your oyster when it comes to Tines. You can do anything if you just know what API calls to hit.
Amazing. And it's interesting that you mentioned that the world is your oyster, because I remember even when I had first discovered Tines, I was a little bit skeptical and thinking like, really, like you can effectively replace, the entire Python standard library plus all of the other, vast libraries that are available, for example, for you to pull from. And there's kind of this paradox of why would you use a no code platform if you already know how to code? And as two people who know a fair amount about writing code, we understand that code is really just the visible tip of the iceberg. Underneath the water, there's so many other costs to maintaining code. You have things like, writing tests, undergoing change management process. I remember that was always such a beast for me because you had to go through so many steps just to get a change implemented. Making sure that everything was set up properly for the CI/CD pipeline. If you needed to make any updates because, say, an API completely changed their endpoints, then you were in charge of updates. We always had to run our deployments in the middle of the night. So anytime you had to make updates, then, you were up 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night working with somebody on the other side of the world looking to get your deployments going. Dennis, any other thoughts there?
I think it all comes down to maintainability, the ease of change, and I've seen this just by the iterative changes we've made on this incident tooling I'm about to go through. It's so easy. If someone notices something, we just noticed something yesterday. Someone was able to accidentally create an incident when they were trying to make an action item, and it's because the regex was just slightly off, and it took me literally 15 seconds to fix it across both our dev and prod tooling. Um, no need to do anything outside of just fixing it in times and being done with it. And that's the value, is that, yeah, I know how to code. Yeah, the company's full of amazing engineers who can do just baffling things with code. But why do you want to overcomplicate something that can be done much more easily and people onboard much quicker to it? I've onboarded a lot of members of our team onto how Tines works, and each one of them is like, within a few minutes, understands what's going on there and understands how everything, because it's graphical. It's easy to follow, and you'll see when we kind of dive into the story, the way I've built mine. My obsessive compulsive tendencies come out because it's very linear and very clean, but it's because it makes it very readable. You can easily follow where things are going, and it's not too much of a spider web as it can be.
Yeah, and it's amazing how it has that, the very Visio flowchart type feel. But for me, also the big draw is that it has that very similar look and feel to Postman, which I'm very used to from working in
Yep.
my engineering days. And so that really helped lower the barrier to entry for me as well. And, I was thinking back, and, I kind of mentioned this at the top where, man, I wish I had Tines instead of having to write those dozens and dozens of little C# applications to run all of my ETL. Because that drag and drop, fix a few inputs, and then you're off and running would be so much easier. Even then, and I had my VS code, done in such a way where I had all my little boilerplate commands. I could very easily, like I made it as quick and reusable as possible, and still Tines is so much faster than working through your stored boilerplate and just going through everything. On top of that, just the change management process, right? It would be so much more, hey, look, I built this, I tested it, it works, and it's good because it's in the cloud. You don't have to go through all the rigmarole of going through the rest of the change management process. And kind of as you alluded to too, just the maintainability aspect of it. If I ever needed to change something, if an API endpoint ever changed, it's just a few clicks and then you're back up and running here in Tines, which, shoot, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So we've talked enough now, and as much as I've enjoyed this conversation, Dennis, I think it's time to give the people what they want. So why don't we go ahead and start by showing off your story? But before we do, I just want to talk a little bit about, when I first started my engineering career, I remember one of the most memorable experiences was my first production incident. There's nothing like the first one. there were so many different moving parts to keep track of because everything was so manual. It was manually spinning up, I think we were using WebEx at the time, WebEx rooms, and just working through the incident with your team members around the world, having to keep in constant communication with leadership and fellow team members over instant messenger, manually updating tickets as you were finding things throughout, the resolution process, and writing up the postmortem. But you have managed to automate all of that. And so I'd love for the folks on the webinar to be able to see all the amazing work that you did.
Sure. Yeah, and I think there's two halves to any good incident management. There's the policy and the procedures, and then there's the tooling. And good tooling is codifying the policy and procedures in code. And that's what we've really tried to do here with the story. So we can kind of dive in. I'm going to warn you, as soon as you put this up on the screen, you're going to be intimidated by the size of this story. So let me walk you through that. Let's see, can we get that up on the screen? How do we do that? There we go. Let's make it so maybe it is focused on this guy. Get that over there. John, can you help us out on the back end? There we go. So terrifyingly large, to be clear. This is well over, actually, let's see how many actions we're at right now in that story. 321 actions in this story, but it's really broken down into entry points. And I'm going to switch to Slack and actually run through it. But what I do is I kind of flow through the incident response process with this /incident command, or what I'm going to be using is /dev incident. And then you can go from there and do a lot. What I'm going to start with is creating an incident. So I'm going to go through this incident create flow. I'm going to actually show you in Slack. So here we go. I'm in Slack, and I'm going to do dev incident create. So this is going to start off probably the biggest flow that we have, and I'm going to kind of show you exactly what it does. First, you get some immediate feedback about what's going on. That is going through the process, going through the steps to create an incident and get it up and running. This is only visible to you, it's not visible to anyone else, and you can run this anywhere. Then it updates this channel saying that, hey, a new incident's been created. And then you can kind of go through that and you can kind of see that, okay, here's the incident channel, this is where it was created, here's the channel, and here's the Zoom. It automatically did all that. Then it can hop in the channel, and in here, it's already kind of pinned a message to the channel with links to the Zoom postmortem, links to Confluence for the process, severity scale, and also it created a Jira epic to house all of that kind of stuff. Also, it welcomed me to the incident as soon as I joined the channel. It kind of gave me a little bit thing that told me, here's how you run the incident help, here's some handy links. And because it recognized that I'm a trained incident commander, it also offered that, hey, are you the commander of this incident? Do you want to run this incident? Like you can tell yourself, yeah, I do. So this will then give me the ability to take on the incident command role. So that looks very simple from this side, but let's go into the actual time side and see what did. So here's its process of incident create. And what it does is it gives that running command, looks up some information about me, and then it starts creating the incident channel. We have a very clear kind of channel name functionality where it uses the date and then it will append 1, 2, 3, etc. if there's been multiple incidents in a given day. So it keeps trying, and eventually it creates the incident. Then I also grab the postmortems. We have a template for an internal and external postmortem. I copy those from their templates, so we have a new one that's made specifically for this, name it properly. And then I set as permissions so that everyone can actually view and edit it. And then I create a Zoom room. So I also, one of the cool things about Times is that you can always handle failure gracefully. So if it succeeds in creating the Zoom room properly, it continues to go through and sets that as a variable to use later. If it fails, though, it falls back to a default Zoom room, just in case. Obviously, you'll always need a Zoom room. Creating one specifically for each incident is super important. It does some other checks. It checks if it's a production incident. This one wasn't, and it will post to a special room that's for our TAM organization. Checks if it's a PSAS, which is a private cloud incident. If it's not, then it posts to the instance channel, picks the right one, considers the severity. This is important. It needs to know, is this a Sev1 or a Sev2? You can pass it an argument that says like it's a Sev1 or a Sev2. If it's a Sev1 or a Sev2, we actually page in people automatically. We page in commanders, we page in our regional support people, we page in our communications people. We get them all started immediately using PagerDuty. Then we go through and we create a Jira epic for this to hold all of the action items for this incident. We add the incident to DynamoDB. DynamoDB is our backend for the living data during an incident. And then we go ahead and post to the actual incident channel information about that incident. We add the user who ran the command to the channel. We pin the message. We add our little crafty bot that's a way for us to give kind of kudos to each other. And then we bookmark the PM, we bookmark the epic, and we bookmark the external PM as well as the Zoom. And those show up right at the top of the incident, right up here. So at the top here, you can kind of see the incident Zoom, internal postmortem. Those are all there ready to go. So now we're in the incident. We're responding to the incident. People can join the Zoom. And one of the things that you do within an incident is you have to talk about what's going on in the incident. You have to update the incident with more details. So again, you can do things like dev incident update, and this will allow you to update the incident with more details about what's going on. Testing the incident tooling. You can choose a severity. And again, it has a nice link here to the severity scale. I'm going to call this a Sev4. We're currently investigating what features are impacted. We're just going to say the core auth is impacted. What environments are impacted? We're just going to say it's a global impact across all of our services. And we can add to the timeline, started up the incident process, and it automatically populates the date right there. So there we go. We're now updated the incident. And what that does, which is an additional value, is it actually updates the message that it posted here in the development incidents channel with the severity. So someone who's just wanting to check out what's going on can see, okay, it's a Sev4. They're investigating it. They know what the summary is and know what environments are impacted. That way, maybe they don't, maybe it's an executive, they just want to know what's going on without having to go into the incident channel. This tells them right off the bat, oh, it's a low severity incident. Maybe it should be fine. And then within the incident, you can do all kinds of great things. You can add to the timeline very easily. Say, for example, I just wanted to add to the timeline that good things are happening. And I'm just saying in the channel via a message, a timestamp, and that good things are happening. And that will automatically add it to the incident timeline without me having to do anything. It's now added to the timeline. I already showed you the incident commander aspect, but there's so much more that can be actually done using this tooling. For example, action items. Tracking action items during an incident is a huge burden. You have to leave Slack, you have to go into Jira, you need to add it to Jira, all that kind of stuff. I wanted to simplify all that. So we have this kind of process where we say AI, we need to fix this so it doesn't happen again. And I just say AI, and what this does on the back end of Tines is it goes through context Jira, creates a project or creates an issue within a project, and it's now created and logged for the incident. So then someone can go back later on and actually move that action item to their backlog or wherever it needs to go. So now I just added an action item. So popping back over to Tines, how all does that work? So we go back up here. What I did was I gave it an incident AI. So we go over to, again, everything's kind of well organized here, incident AI. And when I pass that, I get information about the incident. I then am sending an AI. So I get the AI, I get information about the user. I go and fetch to Jira the user ID, UID for Jira, and then I create the task within Jira. And again, catching failure, very important. If you pass a very long action item message that's over 255 characters, it's going to have an issue because I'm using the summary here to just make it really quick to add an action item. Then it will fail and let the user know, hey, this is why it failed. If it succeeds, it also writes it to DynamoDB just for kind of storage actively in the incident, and then it posts it to the channel. Incredibly simple, but incredibly powerful. Also, when we're doing incidents, we have this concept of a CAN report, a condition actions need report that the commander will sometimes issue for bigger incidents. So if I do dev incident CAN, what this will do is prompt me as the commander to say, this is what's going on. These are the actions we're taking, and this is what we need. I can also, when I'm issuing this CAN report, say like, things are still going well, and this is optional, and then I submit it. And then this is issued in the channel with a CAN report that says, and this is for everyone to be able to see, knowing the status of the incident. Again, this is just a way for us to more easily communicate out information as an incident commander. And again, going back to Tines, how does that work? How does this CAN report work? It's actually incredibly simple. It just checks if I'm the IC, because CAN reports can only be issued by the incident commander. Then it gets all the CAN reports and it shows me the Slack form. So when it does all that, when I presented the form, now I'm taking the submission of the form over in here. So let me grab the incident CAN submission right here. What it does is grab information about the channel, information about me as the commander, writes that into DynamoDB, and posts it to the Slack channel. Really that easy. Again, switching back to Slack, how do I, if I'm a executive at Auth0 and I'm just wanting to know, it's a long incident channel. I don't want to go through and read every single CAN message one by one. I want to just get a message to me showing me all of the different CAN messages that have been issued. I can do dev incident CANs, and it will send me a message, again, directly just to me, showing me all the CAN reports that were posted. This was a CAN report from Dennis on this date at this time, and this is what he said. Say, for example, there's 10 or 20 of these. This is incredibly valuable just for someone popping into the incident to catch up on what's going on. So again, popping back over to Times, the incident update, again, does a lot of stuff on the back end. The goal was to make this look as simple as possible, but be massively powerful on the back end. So when I did that incident update earlier, it did a bunch of transformations. It also updated the incident in DynamoDB. It pulled the summary. It changed the status of the actual Slack channel. So right here, you can see I updated the Slack channel status to say this. So it shows right up at the top. It also goes ahead and goes through and checks if it's resolved. And it's checking if it's if I'm changing severity up to a Sev 2 or Sev 1. It'll go ahead and, again, do that automatic paging of people to bring them into the incident. It'll create a comms channel if it needs to. So this is something that we have a policy where we automatically spin up a communications channel for our customer first org to work through any messaging that they need to. That does that right here. It will also go through and page anyone needs to page and update the Slack message in the channel that it was sent earlier. It'll also update the epic to make sure that the epic reflects the current summary of the incident. It's really important that you want that accurate. So kind of looking through the rest of this, again, this is a incredibly complex story, but it does 3 different entry points. It's either /incident, responses to forms, and then it also is always watching the channel for certain things. Again, I showed this earlier with the AI, but I can also automatically message people when they join the channel. I can also kind of deal with the someone saying, this is a function of the old one. If someone just joins and wants to Zoom and can't seem to find it, I can just say incident Zoom, it'll message me the Zoom link and all of that kind of stuff. Again, very handy to just have on hand. And then finally, I have some follow-ups where I need to go through and check. If the incident goes idle, we need to make sure that we're telling people that the incident is idle and that it needs to be updated. If an incident's not resolved, it needs to be kind of constantly up to date. So this goes through and checks for all unresolved incidents, gets the channel message, and then messages to the Slack if it's been idle for more than 10 minutes. Again, something that most people would never even notice, but is super good to have. Finally, I think there's only a few more things that I wanted to go over. Incident list. This is something that, again, someone was thinking, man, it'd be great if I knew what kind of incidents were happening in a different channel so I don't have to worry about maybe spinning up a new incident. So this can be run actually anywhere that you want to. So I can do dev incident list and get a list of all the active, well, apparently unknown command, I forgot to add list, but it will give me a link to all the active incidents that are running. So if, for example, there were 4 or 5 incidents running at the same time, you could get this and you would know what's going on quickly and be able to pop into that specific incident. Trying to think if there's anything else that I want to go ahead and show off here. I think we'll go ahead and resolve this incident though. So we'll do dev incident resolve. And again, this is another Slack form that will automatically pop up and it will say, okay, you want to resolve the incident? Let's go through and ask you a few more questions, like what caused the incident. Again, gathering this data is incredibly important. It was a configuration change. It was detected via automatic monitoring. How was it resolved? It was resolved by a service restart. And then you can choose a PM owner. And this kind of changes from required or not required depending on the severity. If it's a Sev 2 or a Sev 1, we have to have a PM owner. Someone has to write through the PM. If it's a lower one, that's an optional thing to define who does this, but we'll always kind of follow up. And then we can submit. And then the incident's resolved. We get a message to the channel saying it's been marked resolved. And again, if you go back to that dev incidents channel, you can see that it was marked as resolved up here. This was the original message. Anyone else joining the dev incidents channel will see that the incident was resolved. This was its severity. This was how long it took to resolve from start to finish, 13 minutes. That was our TTR in this case, time to resolve. Give you a summary and the environment's impacted, which is great. It also removes the Zoom link because obviously at this point we don't really need that Zoom link. It gives you the channel, the postmortems, and of course the epic again. So yeah, that's pretty much everything, and I think we're good.
Dennis, real quick, do you mind pivoting back to Slack real quick? Your Times window is still up just so we can see the results of
the
mission for resolve.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, this is the resolve right here. Kind of just shows you all these details about what exactly happened, what the incident duration was, the summary, and all those kind of details. That way you have that in perpetuity in this incidents channel.
And now if I, obviously we're detached from the situation and I was looking at something like this, I would think, man, this must have taken like weeks and weeks and weeks to build. Dennis, do you mind just sharing with everyone about how long it took you to put this together?
Honestly, I had a workable MVP of this entire story within less than a week. I had recreated everything that the old tooling did. And this was not done during my work hours. This was done just a few hours here and there because I really wanted to prove to our leadership that this was a viable option for us to utilize, and that we could add on to it really quickly, that anyone could build this. So I used some of my personal time because again, I love coding, and sadly I don't do it as my day job. So I'm gonna spend as much time as I can outside of hours to do that. So yeah, it was incredibly easy, and now I just maintain it. It takes very little time to add things, remove things. This story has grown by well over 100 actions since I first published it. We added on the Jira functionality, which was again something that they wanted a long time ago in our old tooling, but it was a bear to add, dealing with the Jira API and building that into Node and all of that. Here it was incredibly simple to add on. Codifying more of our policy into the tooling is again super easy. I spend very little time working on this, and now I can easily onboard more people and they can add things, and yeah, it's been absolutely great.
It's funny that you mentioned that coding really isn't part of your day job, because one of the common kind of jokes most programmers revolves around boss coding, like, oh man, here he goes, boss is coding again, because a lot of times team members don't want their boss diving into the tool when it's not their primary responsibility. But I bet your engineering team is pretty thrilled that you built this for them.
Yeah, and it's not really coding. At the end of the day, this is stringing together APIs, and that's something that, again, I think that we should really encourage people to do. And it's funny, since I've kind of went public with this and other uses of tines that I've made. A lot of people are like really jumping on to the tines train at Auth0 because it's just so incredibly powerful that you can build something within less than an hour to handle a situation, rather than spending literal days spinning up a traditional Slack bot and connecting everything in. This is simple, easy, and is so powerful. Like I actually think Tines undersells how powerful their tooling is, because you can do anything that has an API, really truly anything. And the Tines people that I've worked with are just wizards at understanding how to maximize the use of their tooling. I every time I run into an issue, I can just pop into the Slack channel, ask a quick question, and the answers I get are just mind blowing. So much of what you've seen in this time story comes from some of the times people helping me out, answering questions at random hours of the day, when I'm just like trying to figure out how do I automatically append a number onto the count of an incident. And that took me hours to try to work through. And then I asked in the channel, it took maybe a few minutes for them to come up with a really cool and elegant answer.
And as you've implemented this, just what's overall been the response from your engineers as they've grown to use this bot?
Honestly, it's been really well received because of the fact that I really focused first and foremost on the user experience, making sure that I wasn't just building something that worked, but I built something that was easy to use. In an incident, messing around and having a frustrating experience with tooling can really cause you to potentially lose valuable minutes of time. So making this tool easy to use, easy to extend, really a pleasure to work with, lowering the friction for people to be able to add an action item, update the incident, communicate out what's going on, really is essential to improving our incident response process. And is this perfect? Definitely not yet. But that's the cool thing, is that I can just add to it very simply. I have an active backlog of ideas that people add to that. Again, I just take a few, I work at like 6, 7 p.m., grab a few, do them within 10 minutes, and I'm done. I can easily just extend this kind of infinitely, which is just so powerful.
And actually, based on a couple of the comments that are coming in, there's a couple good pointed questions related to two things you just said. The first one is, how often are you adding new functionality to this flow right now, Dennis?
Honestly, it's as the need arises. Right now, there's no like burning needs, other than like we do want to connect into how we define services a little better. We have a really great relationship with a company called Auth0’s, and we want to kind of connect in the tooling with their data that they're kind of shipping to us. So trying to figure that out is really interesting. I've been working closely with them to kind of automate building out what services are impacted, and so you can select from a list that's generated dynamically by our partners over with Auth0’s. So that's just another kind of a thing that I want to add, but really I just add things here and there. It's as we need. It's the improvements that I like doing. Just being able to see like, oh, this could be better if we just move this button here, or we modified this there. Adding the ability for you to just flag something as not an incident and then automatically close it out without asking you all those questions. Again, that was something that took me maybe 30 minutes of time, and it's just so valuable to have.
Yeah, amazing. And you said it's generally been very well received by your engineers, but I'm curious, in the beginning, was there any hesitation or pushback from the organization to take the approach?
I think that was really mitigated by the fact that I built like a very viable stepwise replacement POC. I knew that changing instant tooling is scary. Instant tooling has to work. It's so incredibly important. So by building out the POC to literally do everything that the original tooling did, it was kind of an easy choice. The big thing to convince them on is that Times is a reliable partner to build with. And luckily, we already had a great existing relationship with Times because our security team, as I mentioned in the very beginning, already uses them. And frankly, if our security team believes in Times, how can we argue with that? They're the arbiters of what we should or should not trust at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, exactly. I love that. So now that you've gone through all this, and I know you're, a story or code really or an application is never really truly done, but now that you've got a solid grip on this, what are you thinking about next for building with Tines?
Yeah, there's so much that the potential is there. We have so many kind of legacy Slack bots that really could use some refreshing. So we've been kind of talking through how we move on from this, and how we kind of how we can use Times to make our lives easier. So some of the things that we've been looking at is all of our different bot use cases and how we can potentially use Times to replace them. One of the big things that we've been looking at is MongoDB is a big data store we use. It has a lot of APIs that are really, really powerful. So figuring out how we can replace some of our more manual processes that we do, engineering processes, with automated processes using Times, it's really exciting stuff. And I basically, anytime there's a small use case of someone telling me, hey, this is a manual process that we're doing, your team's gotta help us out with this. I always think, can I do this with Times? That's my first thought now, and it started to be the thought of a lot of members within our operations org is, how can this be done with Times? Maybe this could be done in a more easy to build and more sustainable way. And then we kind of go down that road. And frankly, the answer more often than not is yes. If you can think of it and it has an API, it can be done with Times.
Awesome. And last question, and perhaps the most important, is in the comments we got, Dennis, is the acronym bot available anywhere? We need this. Where can we get it?
Right now, it's not available anywhere. I've been kind of taken aback by the level of interest people have in in that acronym bot. Again, it was literally something I built one night. I just had a beer and decided to build a quick acronym bot. I really wish I had done it for a hackathon, because I feel like I could have won first prize doing it for that. And I need to wait for that you built what with Times competition, because I think I can easily win that. So we'll see. I'm not too against kind of making it more broadly available. It requires basically nothing other than a DynamoDB, which is kind of its power.
Awesome. And I know, maybe we can collaborate, maybe we can make a partnership. I know we're always making efforts to make stories like that more widely available to the broader customer base. So we might have to figure something out there.
Definitely.
In terms of closing thoughts, I wanted to pivot a little bit to some things we can look forward to in the Times platform. First, and the biggest thing that I want to talk about is something that we're going to be releasing in the coming weeks, which is our upgrade to formulas. Currently today, we're on the Liquid templating language, and for the most part, it has served us well. But we've been consistently getting feedback from our users that, there could be a little bit of room for improvement there. But again, Liquid was designed to be a templating language within Shopify, and we were kind of co-opting it for different purposes. So right now we're building the next generation of how to work with data within the platform, which is our formulas. It's going to be a time-specific language for use within those actions, those building blocks that you were showing off within the story. The nice part is the syntax is going to feel very familiar if you've ever worked with spreadsheet formulas, but we've baked in some time-specific improvements that are going to make it easier to work with. We think that formulas is going to offer a better solution for our beginner users by offering a more familiar, kind of more user-friendly interface right off the jump. It'll help make adoption for newer users a little bit simpler, while at the same time providing a more powerful language that's more fit for the purpose for more advanced and power users like yourself. We think that this is going to be a massive step forward in our mission to democratize access to automation. And before I wrap up, I did just get one more question in the comments here. Dennis, could you go further into how you calculated the results around mean time to resolution and other metrics and how you built that into the story?
Yeah, so the MTTR, MTTA in general, metrics are so important. So what we did was we automatically, like I said earlier, we kind of have the living data store as DynamoDB, but then we automatically sync all of our incident data into our data warehouse. So there we can do some really cool advanced analytics on the time to resolve, basically subtracting the resolve time from the start time, figuring out that TTR, and then kind of looking at that over time to see how we're doing as far as responding to incidents and resolving incidents more quickly. The other metric that's super important is our TTA, time to assemble. This is a number that is measured by many engineering organizations as how long it takes from the start of an incident till you have all the people you need in the incident responding to it. So that time to assemble is really important. So we have a command that I didn't go over because it's incredibly simple. That's just called incident assembled, which then you can say that everyone's in the incident needs to be in the incident. And then you can look at that over time to measure our MTTA, which is our mean time to assemble, and really look to how we reduce that, how we make sure that we're getting the right people into the incident as early as possible. And that's an incredibly important metric to be looking at. Overall, just being able to look at number of incidents and how often we're spinning up incidents, all of this is great, and you can do that just by syncing into the data warehouse.
And how often are you looking at metrics like that? Is there some sort of like weekly or monthly meeting where you can pull from the metrics of DynamoDB and kind of figure that out?
Yeah, exactly. We have a weekly incident review meeting where we kind of talk through incidents, and our incident commander group meets on a semi frequent basis, so we can kind of talk through how we improve the processes, how we improve the way that we do things when it comes to incident response. Doing incidents right is so incredibly important. I get a lot of eye rolls when I say I love incidents, but I truly do. They're the best learning opportunities you can have as a leader, as an engineer, really, is when things happen, when negative things happen, how do we kind of roll forward from that? How do we learn from that? How do we grow from that? Learning from incidents is essential, and making incident response as painless as possible is essential. And that's truly the incredible value here.
And you know what? That's perfect. I think that's a perfect closing thought to end on. So Dennis, I know I speak for the rest of the Times team when I say it's been such a pleasure working with you so far. And we're really proud of the story that you've built and the way you've been able to pave the way for building, more of a software engineering specific use case and, going outside the bounds of typical security use cases. So for everyone attending the webinar, thank you so much for attending. Go ahead, and if you want to learn more, check out tamed.com, and we'd love to see you guys bring some more cool engineering use cases to us and see what more we could build in the platform. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Thanks,